The alarm clock screamed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Marcus Reed had set it to go off. He silenced it with a practiced hand, the motion so automatic he barely registered the act. Darkness still pressed against the windows of their small two-bedroom apartment, and for a moment he just lay there, listening to the rhythm of his daughter's breathing through the thin wall that separated their rooms. 7-year-old Zoe had kicked off her blankets again. He could hear the soft rustle of sheets, the small sigh she always made when she dreamed. Marcus swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet finding the worn carpet, and padded quietly to her room. She was sprawled diagonally across her twin bed, one arm flung over her head, the other clutching the stuffed elephant his mother had given her before the cancer took her 2 years ago. Her silk bonnet had slipped halfway off, revealing the neat cornrows he'd spent an hour perfecting last Sunday evening. The purple and silver beads at the ends caught the faint glow from her nightlight, the one shaped like a crescent moon. Marcus adjusted her bonnet gently, pulled the blanket back over her small form, and stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Just watching, making sure she was real, safe, his. The kitchen was quiet as he moved through his morning routine. Coffee in the old percolator his father had left him before the heart attack 5 years ago. 2 slices of bread in the toaster. He counted the bills in his wallet while he waited. $43 until Friday's paycheck. Enough for gas, Zoe's school lunch account, and maybe the craft supplies she needed for her art project. Maybe. The electricity bill sat on the counter, the red past due stamp glaring at him. He'd call them today during his lunch break and work out another payment plan. They'd been understanding before. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen downstairs, the elderly woman who watched Zoe every morning before school. "Ready when you are, sweetheart. Made extra dumplings yesterday. Bringing some up for Zoe's lunch." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, gratitude mixing with the familiar shame of needing help. He texted back his thanks, then moved to wake his daughter. "Baby girl," he said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Time to get up." Zoe's eyes fluttered open, warm brown like her mother's had been, like his own. She smiled before she was fully awake, that pure joy children have before the world teaches them caution. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, sunshine. Mrs. Chen made dumplings." That got her moving. Within 20 minutes they'd navigated the morning chaos. Breakfast eaten, teeth brushed, her favorite yellow dress with the sunflowers smoothed down, her backpack checked twice for homework. Marcus knelt to help her with her shoes, the laces still tricky for her small fingers. "Daddy." Zoe's voice was quiet, thoughtful in the way that always preceded difficult questions. "Yeah, baby. Is Mommy watching us from heaven?" Marcus's hands stilled on the laces. 3 years after Vanessa had walked out, since she'd decided that being a mother to a 4-year-old and a wife to a man who had no ambition wasn't the life she wanted. She'd taken nothing but her clothes and his heart, leaving him with Zoe and a note that said she was sorry but she couldn't breathe anymore. He'd never told Zoe the truth. How could he explain to a child that her mother had chosen to leave? So he'd said what hurt less, that Mommy had gotten sick and gone to heaven, that she loved Zoe more than anything, that she was always watching over them. "Every single day," Marcus said, finishing the bowl. "She's so proud of you." Zoe threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him backward. "I love you, Daddy. I love you more, baby girl." He walked her downstairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment, accepting the warm container of dumplings with gratitude he could never fully express. The old woman patted his cheek with her soft, wrinkled hand. "You're a good father, Marcus. Your daughter knows how much you love her. That's what matters." The words stayed with him during the drive to Riverside Regional Airport where he'd worked maintenance for the past 6 years. The sun was just starting to paint the sky pink and gold as he pulled into the employee lot in his 15-year-old Honda, the one that needed new brakes he couldn't afford yet. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. His work uniform, navy blue coveralls with his name stitched over the heart, hung in his locker. Marcus changed quickly, nodded to the other early shift workers, and checked the day's assignments on the board. Routine inspections on runway 2, repair work on the lighting system, general maintenance on the private hangar facilities. The work was honest, physical, and mind-numbing. But it paid the bills, barely, and left him too tired to think about the life he'd planned before everything fell apart. Before he'd dropped out of his aerospace engineering program at State when Vanessa got pregnant. Before his father died and his mother got sick and he'd become responsible for everyone and everything. Before the weight of the world settled onto his shoulders and never left. By noon, Marcus was covered in grease, his muscles aching from crawling through access panels, his mind already counting down the hours until he could pick up Zoe from Mrs. Chen's and spend the evening helping with homework and making dinner and pretending that this was enough. That's when he heard the explosion. The sound tore through the afternoon like the sky itself was ripping apart. Marcus dropped his wrench, his body reacting before his mind could catch up, every instinct screaming danger. He ran toward the source, his heart hammering, his boots pounding against the concrete. Black smoke billowed from the private runway on the airport's east side, thick and oily, staining the blue sky. Other workers were running too, some toward the fire, others away from it. Someone was shouting into a radio, calling for emergency services. Marcus reached the edge of the runway and stopped, his breath catching in his throat. A small private jet, sleek, expensive, the kind that cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes, had crashed on landing. The fuselage had buckled, one wing crumpled like paper. Flames licked up from the engine, spreading fast, consuming metal and upholstery with terrifying speed. "Everyone back," one of the fire team supervisors was shouting. "The fuel tank could blow any second." But Marcus wasn't listening. Through the smoke and the flames, he could see movement in the cockpit. Someone was still inside. His body moved before his mind could stop it. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the nearest emergency station and ran toward the jet, ignoring the shouts behind him. The heat hit him like a physical wall, searing his exposed skin, but he kept moving. The cockpit door was jammed, warped from the impact. Marcus wedged the extinguisher into the gap and used it as a lever, his arms straining, his muscles screaming. The metal groaned and finally gave way. Inside, a woman was slumped over the controls, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. She was maybe late 30s, her dark brown skin covered in soot and cuts, her expensive business suit torn and stained. Even unconscious, even bleeding, she radiated a kind of authority that Marcus recognized instinctively. This was someone used to being in control. "I've got you," Marcus said, even though she couldn't hear him. He unclipped her seatbelt with shaking hands, careful of her neck and spine. She was small, maybe 5'4", but dead weight is always heavy. He hooked his arms under hers and pulled, dragging her toward the door as the flames crept closer, the smoke thickening until he could barely see. They tumbled out of the jet together, Marcus taking the impact as they hit the concrete. He rolled, covering her body with his as the fuel tank finally exploded, a ball of orange and red that sent debris flying in every direction. When the world stopped spinning, when the ringing in his ears faded enough to hear the sirens approaching, Marcus looked down at the woman in his arms. Her eyes were open now, wide and disoriented, the color of dark honey flecked with gold. She was staring at him like she couldn't quite process what had happened. "You're safe," Marcus said, his voice rough from the smoke. "You're okay now." Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear over the chaos. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp again. The paramedics arrived, pulling her from his arms, loading her onto a stretcher, asking questions Marcus couldn't quite answer. Someone threw a blanket over his shoulders. Someone else was checking him for injuries, shining lights in his eyes, taking his blood pressure. "Sir, you need to come to the hospital. You've got burns." "I'm fine," Marcus said, pulling away. "I need to get back to work." But his supervisor, a gruff man named Davis who'd given Marcus a chance 6 years ago when no one else would, put a hand on his shoulder. "You're done for the day, Reed. Go home. Be with your daughter. We'll handle the paperwork tomorrow." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he couldn't afford to miss a shift, but the adrenaline was draining out of him now, leaving him hollow and shaking. He nodded, grabbed his things from his locker, and drove home in a daze. Mrs. Chen took one look at him and called Zoe out early, wrapping him in a hug that smelled like ginger and concern. "You're a hero," she said, but Marcus didn't feel like one. He felt exhausted. That evening, Marcus helped Zoe with her art project at the kitchen table, letting her chatter wash over him like white noise. She was making a collage about families, cutting pictures from magazines and gluing them onto construction paper with fierce concentration. "Daddy, why do you smell like smoke?" she asked, her nose wrinkling. "There was a small fire at work," he said, not wanting to scare her. "Nothing serious." She accepted this easily, the way children do, and went back to her project. Marcus watched her work, her tongue poking out in concentration, her small hands so careful with the scissors and glue. This was his world, this apartment, this daughter, this quiet life they'd built from the wreckage of everything he'd lost. He didn't know that the woman he'd pulled from the burning jet was Dr. Sienna Cross, founder and CEO of Cross Technologies, a company worth $12 billion. He didn't know that she was running from something far more dangerous than a plane crash. He didn't know that his simple act of courage had put both him and Zoe directly in the crosshairs of people who didn't forgive interference. And he especially didn't know that at 2:47 a.m., his entire world was about to change. The pounding on the door jerked Marcus out of a restless sleep. For a moment he was disoriented, his body still caught in the nightmare he'd been having, flames and smoke and a woman's face disappearing into fire. Then the pounding came again, urgent and desperate, and he was fully awake. The clock on his nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Marcus grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside his bed, a precaution that had always felt paranoid until this exact moment, and moved quietly through the dark apartment. Through the peephole he could see a woman, but the security light in the hallway was broken again, leaving her face in shadow. "Please," a voice came through the door, low and urgent and shaking. "Please, I need help. They're coming." Something in the desperation of that voice made Marcus unlock the deadbolt despite every instinct screaming at him to call the police first. The door swung open, and the woman from the plane crash stumbled into his apartment. But she wasn't the composed businesswoman he'd glimpsed in those brief seconds before unconsciousness. Her designer clothes were torn and dirty, her dark hair wild around her face. Blood, fresh blood, soaked through a makeshift bandage on her left arm. Her eyes were huge in her face, darting to the stairwell behind her, hunted. "I'm sorry," she gasped, gripping the doorframe for support. "I didn't know where else to go. They found me at the hospital. I barely got out. I saw your face on the news. They said you were a hero. They showed your apartment building." "Wait. Slow down," Marcus said, catching her as her knees buckled. She was light in his arms, trembling like a bird. "Who found you? Who's coming?" Before she could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Men's voices, low and professional. "Check every floor." She couldn't have gone far. Marcus's mind raced. He could turn her over right now, wash his hands of whatever this was. The smart move, the safe move. But then he looked down at her face, at the terror in her eyes, and saw his own daughter. Saw what it looked like when someone was truly, desperately afraid. "Zoe's room," he whispered, pulling the woman toward the back of the apartment. "Hide in the closet. Don't make a sound." She nodded, moving on instinct, disappearing into his daughter's room. Marcus closed the door softly, then grabbed a shirt from his own room and pulled it on. Made himself look like someone who'd just been woken up, annoyed and confused. The knock on his door was hard, authoritative. Marcus took a breath, gripped the baseball bat, and opened it. Two men stood in the hallway. Both wore dark suits that screamed money and power. Both had the cold, assessing eyes of men used to getting what they wanted. The taller one had a scar running down his left cheek. The shorter one had hands that looked like they'd broken things, people, before. "Marcus Reed?" Scarface asked, his voice smooth, almost pleasant. "Who's asking?" "We're looking for a woman, Dr. Sienna Cross. She was involved in an accident earlier today, and she left the hospital against medical advice. We have reason to believe she might have come here." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, making himself look relaxed, bored. "Why would she come here? I pulled her out of a burning plane, sure, but I don't know her. Haven't seen her since the paramedics took her." "Mind if we take a look inside?" Scarface smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Just to be sure." "Yeah, I do mind," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "My 7-year-old daughter is sleeping, and you're not the police, so you don't have any right to be here. You want to search my apartment? Come back with a warrant." The two men exchanged a glance. Something passed between them, some silent communication that made Marcus's grip tighten on the bat. "You seem like a smart man, Mr. Reed," the shorter one said, stepping closer. "Smart enough to know when to mind your own business. If Dr. Cross contacts you, you should tell her that her husband just wants to talk. I want to make sure she's safe." "Her husband," Marcus repeated, understanding flooding through him. This wasn't about the crash. This was about something much older, much darker. "Mr. Cross is very concerned about his wife," Scarface continued. "She's not well. She needs help, medical attention. We're just trying to protect her." Through the thin walls, Marcus heard Zoe stir, a small sound of waking. Both men's heads turned toward the noise like predators scenting prey. "You need to leave," Marcus said, moving to block their view of the hallway. "Now." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Scarface smiled again, that cold, empty expression. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Reed. You have a beautiful daughter, Zoe, right? 7 years old? Goes to Martin Luther King Elementary?" The threat hung in the air between them, explicit and terrifying. Marcus's blood turned to ice, but he kept his voice level. "Get out of my building before I call the real police and tell them 2 men were threatening my child in the middle of the night." They left, but slowly, making it clear they were choosing to go, not being forced. Marcus waited until he heard their footsteps fade completely before closing the door and locking every lock. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline and rage making his movements jerky. He found Dr. Sienna Cross sitting on the floor of Zoe's closet, her arms wrapped around her knees, silent tears streaming down her face. Zoe was still asleep in her bed, oblivious to the drama unfolding feet away. "He found me," Sienna whispered. "I thought I was free. I thought when the plane went down, when everyone thought I was dead for those few hours, I finally had a chance to disappear. But he found me." Marcus knelt down, his voice low and urgent. "Who is he? What does he want?" "My husband," she said, the word dripping with bitterness. "Malcolm Cross. He wants control. He's always wanted control. Of me, my company, my money, my life. I filed for divorce 6 months ago. He said he'd kill me before he'd let me leave." She looked up at Marcus, her honey gold eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "The plane crash wasn't an accident. The investigators won't find it. He's too careful, but I know. He tried to kill me, and when that didn't work, when you pulled me out alive, he couldn't let me disappear." Marcus sat back on his heels, his mind reeling. "Why come here? You don't know me." "Because," Sienna said, her voice breaking, "you're the only person in the last 5 years who helped me without wanting something in return. You risked your life for a stranger. That means something. That means maybe, just maybe, you'll help me again." In the doorway, lit by the glow of the nightlight, Zoe stood in her purple pajamas, her bonnet askew, her eyes wide. "Daddy? Who's the crying lady?" Marcus's heart stopped. Sienna stood frozen, and in that moment, everything changed. "She's someone." "Who needs help, baby girl?" Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. And we help people. Remember? Zoe nodded solemnly, walked over to Sienna and held out her stuffed elephant. Mr. Trunk makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can hold him. Sienna took the toy with trembling hands, a sob catching in her throat. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus looked at the woman holding his daughter's elephant, at his child standing there in her bare feet offering comfort to a stranger, and knew with absolute certainty that there was no going back. Whatever this was, whatever came next, they were in it now. We need to talk, he said to Sienna. All of it. Everything. And then we figure out what to do next. As dawn began to break outside the windows, as Zoe climbed into bed with her elephant and Sienna, as Marcus made coffee with shaking hands, he couldn't know that this was just the beginning. He couldn't know that by sunrise, Malcolm Cross would have put a price on his head. He couldn't know that Sienna Cross was worth $12 billion, that helping her would mean becoming a target himself, that his life and Zoe's life would never be simple again. But he also couldn't know that this woman, the stranger he'd pulled from fire, would become the missing piece in their broken family. Sometimes salvation comes at 2:47 a.m. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives arrive as desperate knocks on doors we almost don't open. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the apartment windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his third cup of coffee growing cold between his hands, while Sienna Cross perched on the edge of his worn couch like she might bolt at any second. Her injured arm was now properly bandaged. Marcus had insisted, using the first aid kit he kept for Zoe's scraped knees, and she'd washed the blood and soot from her face in his bathroom. Without the grime and terror, he could see her clearly now. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that held both intelligence and exhaustion in equal measure. She was beautiful, he realized with uncomfortable awareness, but it was the kind of beauty that came with a price tag he couldn't afford to notice. Zoe sat between them on the floor, coloring in her favorite book, occasionally glancing up at the strange woman in their living room with curious but accepting eyes. Children had a way of adapting that adults had lost somewhere along the way. "Tell me everything," Marcus said quietly. "From the beginning." Sienna took a shaky breath, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I met Malcolm Cross when I was 23. I'd just defended my PhD thesis in computer engineering at MIT. He was 35, charismatic, and successful. He said he believed in my research, wanted to help me build something revolutionary." She laughed bitterly. "I was so young, so stupid. I thought he loved me for my mind. It turned out he just wanted to own it." Marcus said nothing, just listened. "We got married within 6 months. He helped me start Cross Technologies, my name, my research, but his money, his connections. For the first year, it was perfect. Then the company started taking off. My AI systems, my innovations, they were changing the industry. Suddenly, I wasn't just Malcolm's brilliant wife anymore. I was becoming more successful than him." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "That's when everything changed. He couldn't stand it. That I was the one on magazine covers, the one getting awards, the one other tech giants wanted to partner with. So he started controlling me. What I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. He isolated me from my family, my friends, anyone who might tell me I deserved better." "Physical abuse?" Marcus asked gently. Sienna pulled up the sleeve of her borrowed shirt, one of his old college tees that hung loose on her small frame, revealing a constellation of scars on her forearm. Some old and faded, others newer. "He was careful. Never my face, never anywhere visible in professional photos. He's too smart for that." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. He'd seen this pattern before. His own mother had worn long sleeves in summer before she finally left his father when Marcus was 12. He knew what it looked like when someone systematically destroyed another person's sense of self-worth. "6 months ago, I found out he'd been embezzling from the company," Sienna continued. My company. Funneling money into offshore accounts using my proprietary technology to bid on defense contracts I'd explicitly refused. When I confronted him, She touched her ribs unconsciously. I ended up in the hospital. Told everyone I'd fallen down the stairs. But you filed for divorce. I hired the best lawyers money could buy, set up a separate bank account he couldn't access, moved into a secure apartment building. I thought I'd covered everything. She looked at him with haunted eyes. But Malcolm isn't just wealthy, Marcus. He's connected. Former military intelligence, relationships with people who do things that never make the news. The plane crash was supposed to look like pilot error. Instead, it just gave me a chance to disappear. Except he found you, Marcus said. He always finds me. The despair in her voice was absolute. I have a billion-dollar company, security teams, lawyers on retainer. None of it matters. He has power in places I can't reach. Zoe looked up from her coloring book, her young face serious. My daddy's really good at hiding. We play hide and seek, and I never find him. The absurdity of the statement broke the tension. Sienna laughed despite herself, a real laugh that transformed her face. Is that right? Huh? And he's super strong. He can lift me up really, really high. Zoe demonstrated by standing and raising her arms above her head. Higher than the ceiling, almost. Almost, Marcus agreed, feeling something warm unfold in his chest at his daughter's fierce defense of him. Baby girl, why don't you go get dressed for the day? We're not going to school today. Yay! Zoe bounced toward her room, then paused. Is the sad lady staying with us? Marcus looked at Sienna, saw the question in her eyes, the desperate hope mixed with fear that she'd already imposed too much. Yes, he said, she's staying with us until we figure things out. After Zoe disappeared into her room, Sienna spoke quickly, urgently. I can pay you. Whatever you need, I have access to accounts Malcolm doesn't know about. I can make sure you and Zoe are protected. That you have? I don't want your money, Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. That's not why I'm helping you. Then why? Sienna demanded. Why risk yourself and your daughter for someone you don't even know? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his cold coffee. Because 3 years ago, my wife walked out on us. Just left, without warning, without explanation. For the longest time, I was angry. Then I realized she was probably running from something too, maybe not a person like you are, but from the weight of expectations, from a life that was suffocating her. He looked up, meeting Sienna's eyes. I couldn't help her. I didn't even see how much she was struggling until she was already gone. But I can help you, and maybe that means something. Before Sienna could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Davis, his supervisor. News vans at the airport. They're calling you a hero. Might want to lay low for a few days. Take paid leave. Then another text, this one from Mrs. Chen. Young men in suits asking about you downstairs. I told them nothing. Be careful, sweetheart. Marcus's blood ran cold. They're already looking. They know I helped you. Sienna stood abruptly, panic flooding her face. I need to leave. Now, before they hurt you or Zoe. And where? Marcus asked, standing too. You said it yourself. He always finds you. Running alone isn't working. So, what do you suggest? We can't hide here forever. Marcus thought about the men in his hallway, their cold eyes and empty threats. He thought about Zoe, sleeping peacefully while danger circled closer. He thought about the stack of unpaid bills on his counter and the engineering textbooks gathering dust on his shelf, the remnants of a life he'd abandoned because survival had seemed more important than dreams. We don't hide, he said slowly, an idea forming. We fight back, but we do it smart. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Fight Malcolm Cross. Sienna shook her head. You don't understand what you're up against. He has lawyers, politicians, people who— What he doesn't have, Marcus interrupted, is you, your company, your technology, your reputation. You said he's been embezzling, using your work for illegal contracts. That means there's evidence. We just need to find it and expose him before he can hurt anyone else. I've tried. He's too careful. Everything's hidden behind shell corporations and encrypted files. Marcus felt a familiar spark, something he hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of a problem that needed solving, a puzzle that required the kind of thinking his maintenance work never demanded. What if someone could access those files? Someone with the right skills? Sienna studied him carefully. Marcus, what exactly did you do before you worked airport maintenance? He hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed her a photo he kept hidden in a locked folder. A much younger version of himself in a cap and gown, standing next to his beaming mother outside the engineering building at State University. The banner behind them read, Dean's List, Aerospace Engineering Program. I was 2 semesters from graduating, he said quietly. Top of my class, had a paid internship lined up at a major aerospace firm. Then Vanessa got pregnant, my father died, and suddenly there were more important things than finishing a degree. You gave it up, Sienna said, understanding dawning in her eyes. For your family. For Zoe. And I'd do it again. He meant it. But that doesn't mean I forgot everything I learned. Engineering, systems analysis, problem solving. It's all still here. He tapped his temple. I just haven't had reason to use it. Malcolm's security systems are sophisticated, Sienna warned. Military-grade encryption, biometric access, redundant backups, even if you could hack them. I'm not talking about hacking, Marcus said. I'm talking about understanding systems well enough to find their weaknesses. Every system has a vulnerability, Dr. Cross. Every single one. We just need to find his. Zoe emerged from her room in her favorite yellow dress with the sunflowers, the same one she'd worn yesterday. Daddy, can we have pancakes? The mundane request jarred them both back to reality. Here they were, planning to take down a powerful billionaire, and his 7-year-old daughter just wanted breakfast. Yeah, baby girl, Marcus said, his voice softening. Pancakes sound perfect. As he moved to the kitchen, measuring out flour and cracking eggs into a bowl, Sienna watched him with something like wonder. This man who lived in a modest apartment, who counted dollars in his wallet every morning, who worked a job that didn't challenge him, he was offering to risk everything to help her. Not for money, not for recognition, just because it was right. I don't deserve this, she said quietly. Marcus looked up from the mixing bowl. Deserve has nothing to do with it. You need help. We can provide it. That's how it works. That's not how my world works, Sienna said. In my world, everything has a price. Everyone wants something. Then maybe, Zoe chimed in, climbing onto a kitchen chair, you've been in the wrong world. The simple truth from a 7-year-old silenced them both. They ate pancakes at the small kitchen table. Marcus, Zoe, and a billionaire CEO whose husband wanted her dead. The absurdity of it wasn't lost on any of them. Sienna watched as Marcus cut Zoe's pancakes into small pieces, as he laughed at her syrup mustache, as he wiped her mouth with a gentleness that spoke of years of practice. This was what she'd missed, Sienna realized. Not the grand gestures or the expensive gifts Malcolm had showered her with in the beginning, but this, the quiet intimacy of a family sharing breakfast, the casual touching and teasing, the sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. So, Marcus said after breakfast, after Zoe had returned to her coloring book, we need a plan. First priority is keeping you safe. They know you came here, which means this apartment is compromised. I have a safe house, Sienna said. A property I bought under my maiden name years ago. Malcolm doesn't know about it. It's about 2 hours north, in the mountains. Good, that's where we go, but we need to move carefully. They'll be watching for your car, your credit cards, anything that leaves a digital trail. I have cash, Sienna said, and a car I keep at a storage facility across town, registered to a shell company. Marcus nodded approvingly. You've been planning this for a while. I've been trying to escape for a year, Sienna admitted. Every time I get close, he finds a way to pull me back. The crash was supposed to be my chance. Everyone thinking I was dead would give me time to disappear completely. But I underestimated how fast he'd move. We need supplies, Marcus said, thinking out loud. Clothes for Zoe, food, my laptop, and I need to call Mrs. Chen, make sure she knows we're okay. Marcus, Sienna said carefully, the people you love are now targets. Everyone close to you becomes leverage Malcolm can use. The words hit him like a fist. Mrs. Chen with her kind eyes and her dumplings. His few friends from work. Even his ex-wife, despite everything, was still Zoe's mother. All of them potentially in danger because he'd chosen to help a stranger. Then we make sure Malcolm Cross has bigger problems to worry about than an elderly neighbor, Marcus said grimly. You said there's evidence of embezzlement, illegal contracts. Where would it be? His private server, most likely. He keeps it at his estate. Biometric security, no internet connection, completely isolated. So we'd need physical access. Impossible. The estate has armed security cameras everywhere. Even if we got in, I'd need his fingerprint or retinal scan to access the server. Marcus thought for a moment. What about your company? Cross Technologies. You're still the CEO, right? The majority shareholder. On paper, yes. But Malcolm has been positioning himself to take over, claiming I'm mentally unstable, unfit to run the company. He has board members in his pocket. But not all of them, Marcus guessed. There have to be people loyal to you, people who remember that you built this company, not him. Sienna's eyes lit up with understanding. My CFO, Patricia Okonkwo. She's been with me since the beginning. And my head of security, James Wu. They've both questioned Malcolm's influence, but I've been too afraid to trust anyone. We need to trust someone, Marcus said, because we can't do this alone. The rest of the morning was spent in careful planning. Marcus called Davis, explained that he needed to take his daughter out of town for a few days, a family emergency, nothing serious. Davis, gruff but understanding, approved the leave immediately. You earned it, pulling that woman from the plane. Take care of yourself, Reed. Mrs. Chen was harder to convince but eventually agreed to tell anyone who asked that Marcus and Zoe had gone to visit relatives upstate. You're in trouble, she said flatly. Real trouble, not the kind you can run from. I know, Marcus admitted. But I don't have a choice, Mrs. Chen. This is the right thing to do. Your heart is too good for this world, Marcus Reed, she said, but there was affection in her voice. Be careful. Come back to us. By early afternoon, they were ready to move. Marcus packed a duffel bag with clothes for him and Zoe, grabbed his old laptop from the closet where it had been gathering dust, and stuffed his engineering textbooks into a backpack. He might need them. Sienna had borrowed more of his clothes, rolling up the sleeves and cuffing the pants to fit her smaller frame. She'd pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail, removed all her jewelry. Without the trappings of wealth, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but also more real. How do I look? She asked with a wry smile. Like a regular person? You look like someone ready to fight back, Marcus said. They left the apartment building through the service entrance, avoiding the main lobby where Malcolm's men might be watching. Marcus's Honda was parked in the back lot, old, unremarkable, the kind of car that blended into traffic. Perfect. Zoe sat in the back seat, clutching Mr. Trunk the elephant, her eyes wide with excitement. Are we going on an adventure, Daddy? Something like that, baby girl. Will there be mountains? I like mountains. Lots of mountains, Marcus promised, catching Sienna's eye in the rearview mirror. She was looking back at the apartment building, at the life she was leaving behind, again. Regrets? He asked quietly. Only that it took so long, she said, and that I'm dragging you into this. I walked into it with my eyes open, Marcus reminded her. No one dragged me anywhere. They drove north on Highway 89, away from the city, toward the mountains that rose blue and distant against the horizon. Behind them, Malcolm Cross's men were searching every hotel, every shelter, every place a desperate woman might hide. But they weren't looking for a single mother and her daughter, traveling with a maintenance worker in an old Honda. They weren't looking for a family. The safe house was exactly what Marcus had expected, and nothing like it at the same time. It sat on 20 acres of pine forest, accessible only by a dirt road that wound through the trees for nearly 2 miles. The house itself was modest. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room with a stone fireplace. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed wealth or importance. "I bought it 5 years ago," Sienna explained as they unloaded the car. "Right after the first time Malcolm hit me. I told myself it was an investment property, but really, I think I knew even then that I'd need somewhere to run." The evening sun filtered through the tall pines, casting long shadows across the porch. Zoe immediately discovered a family of deer grazing in the clearing and spent 20 minutes watching them in reverent silence, her small hands pressed against the window. "She's wonderful," Sienna said, standing beside Marcus as they watched his daughter. "You've done an amazing job raising her." "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water," Marcus admitted. "But she makes it worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice. Worth it." Her mother... Sienna started carefully, then stopped. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "Her mother left when Zoe was 4, Marcus said, surprising himself with his willingness to share. "Vanessa. We'd been high school sweethearts, got married too young because that's what you did. When she got pregnant, I was terrified, but also excited, you know? Like finally my life had purpose." He watched Zoe point at the deer, her mouth moving in silent wonder. But Vanessa wasn't ready. She'd had dreams. Wanted to travel, be an artist, live this big adventurous life. Instead, she got stuck with a baby and a husband who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. One morning, I woke up and she was just gone. Left a note saying she was sorry, that she loved Zoe but couldn't breathe anymore. "That must have destroyed you," Sienna said softly. "It did, for a while. I was angry, hurt, felt betrayed, but then I realized something. She was trapped. Maybe not physically like you were, but trapped in a life she never chose, with responsibilities that crushed her. So she ran." He looked at Sienna. "I spent a long time hating her for that. But maybe running was the bravest thing she could do." "That's very generous of you." "It's reality," Marcus said, "and it taught me something important. That love isn't about ownership or control. It's about letting people be free, even when it hurts you, even when you don't understand their choices." Sienna was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Malcolm proposed to me at the top of the Empire State Building. It was romantic, perfect. He'd rented out the entire observation deck. There were roses, champagne, a string quartet. I said yes because I thought this was what love looked like. Grand gestures, expensive displays." She laughed bitterly. "The first time he hit me was 3 years later. I'd forgotten to cancel a meeting with a male colleague Malcolm didn't like. He backhanded me so hard I saw stars, then spent the next hour apologizing, crying, saying he was so sorry he'd never do it again. He just loved me so much he couldn't stand the thought of losing me." Marcus felt his jaw clench, but he said nothing. This was her story to tell. "And I believed him," Sienna continued, "because that's what victims do, right? We believe the apologies. We make excuses. He's under stress. The company's struggling. I shouldn't have made him angry. It took years before I realized that nothing I did or didn't do mattered. He was always going to hurt me, because hurting me made him feel powerful." "When did you know you had to leave?" "The night he broke 3 of my ribs," Sienna said flatly. I woke up in the hospital, unable to breathe properly. The doctor, this young woman, couldn't have been more than 30. She looked me in the eyes and said, "He's going to kill you eventually. They always do. The only question is whether you'll walk out or be carried out." Something about the way she said it, like she'd seen it happen before, like I was just another statistic waiting to happen. It broke through all my denial. She turned to face Marcus directly. I filed for divorce the next week. Malcolm laughed, said I'd never escape him, that he'd make sure I lost everything, my company, my reputation, my freedom. He had lawyers on retainer, investigators who could dig up dirt on anyone. He said even if I got away, he'd make sure I spent the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. So you've been running ever since. Planning to run, Sienna corrected. Moving money, creating false trails, setting up this place. The plane crash was supposed to be my exit strategy. Everyone believing I was dead would give me time to actually disappear. But I underestimated his reach, his paranoia. He had people at the hospital within hours of the crash, searching for me. Marcus absorbed all of this, piecing together the picture of a woman who'd built a billion-dollar empire but couldn't escape one man's need for control. "We're going to stop him," he said with quiet conviction. "Not just get you away from him. Actually stop him. Make sure he can never hurt you or anyone else again." "How?" "He's untouchable, Marcus. Money, power, connections." "Everyone has a weakness," Marcus interrupted. "Every system, every person, every fortress. We just need to find him." That night, after Zoe had fallen asleep in one of the bedrooms, Marcus and Sienna sat by the fireplace, laptops open, notebooks spread across the coffee table. Sienna had managed to access some of Cross Technology's secure files remotely using encrypted connections and burner devices. "These are Malcolm's known business dealings," she explained, pulling up spreadsheets and contracts. "Mostly legitimate, defense contracts, government partnerships, private sector deals. But here," she highlighted a series of transactions. "These shell companies, I didn't authorize them, didn't even know they existed until 6 months ago." Marcus studied the data with growing interest, his engineering mind automatically looking for patterns, anomalies, weaknesses in the structure. "These payments, they're regular, scheduled. Every month, same amounts, same destinations. That's not random skimming, that's systematic." "Money laundering," Sienna suggested. "Maybe, or funding for something specific." He pulled up another document. "What's Project Nightfall?" Sienna's face went pale. "I don't know. I've never seen that before." They dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of corporate obfuscation. What they found made Marcus's blood run cold. Project Nightfall wasn't just embezzlement. It was a weapons development program using Sienna's AI technology, the same systems designed to improve autonomous vehicles and medical diagnostics, weaponized for military applications. Autonomous drones, targeting systems, surveillance networks, all developed without government oversight, sold to the highest bidder regardless of international law. "My God," Sienna breathed. "He's been using my research to build weapons, selling them to... Some of these countries are under international sanctions. This is treason." "This is leverage," Marcus corrected. "If we can prove this, if we can show that Malcolm Cross has been illegally developing and selling weapons technology..." "He goes to prison," Sienna finished, "for a very long time." "But we need more than spreadsheets and file names," Marcus said. "We need the actual technology, the communications with buyers, proof that he's personally involved. That's all on his private server at the estate." They looked at each other across the coffee table, the firelight casting shadows on their faces, both thinking the same thing. "We have to break in," Marcus said. "That's insane." "Do you have a better idea?" Sienna was quiet, her mind racing through possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. Finally, she shook her head. "No, but we can't do it alone. We need help. Your CFO, Patricia Okonkwo, and James Wu, my head of security. If anyone can help us access that estate, it's him. Marcus nodded, making notes. We will contact them tomorrow, arrange a meeting, figure out who we can trust and who's been compromised. Then we plan the actual break-in. Quietly, carefully, no room for error. Marcus, Sienna said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. Why are you doing this? Really? You could hand me over to Malcolm right now, collect a reward probably, go back to your safe, quiet life. Why risk everything? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. My grandmother used to tell me this story, he finally said, about a man who saw someone drowning in a river. The man dove in to save them, nearly drowning himself in the process. When someone asked him why he'd risked his life for a stranger, he said, "Because when you see someone drowning, you don't calculate the odds or weigh the consequences, you just jump." He looked at Sienna. "You're drowning. I jumped. It's that simple." "It's not simple," Sienna said, tears glimmering in her eyes. "It's extraordinary, and I don't know how to repay—" "You don't repay kindness," Marcus interrupted gently. "You pass it forward. When this is over, when you're safe and Malcolm's locked up, you help the next person who's drowning. That's how it works." Sienna wiped her eyes, nodded. "When this is over," she repeated. "Do you really think we'll make it?" "We have to," Marcus said simply. "Zoe deserves a world where people like Malcolm don't win." They worked into the night, building their case, identifying targets, planning their approach. At some point, Marcus looked up to find Sienna asleep on the couch, her head resting on a pile of papers, exhaustion finally claiming her. He grabbed a blanket from the bedroom and draped it over her carefully, trying not to wake her. In sleep, with her face relaxed and unguarded, she looked younger, almost peaceful. The lines of stress and fear that had become permanent fixtures smoothed away. Marcus returned to his laptop, to the data they'd uncovered, and felt the weight of what they were attempting settle onto his shoulders. They were going up against a man with unlimited resources, powerful connections, and absolutely no conscience. But they had something Malcolm didn't, truth on their side. And sometimes, Marcus thought, that had to be enough. The call came at 6:47 a.m., shattering the peaceful quiet of the mountain morning. Marcus, already awake and making coffee, grabbed his phone before it could wake Sienna or Zoe. "Mr. Reed." The voice was female, professional, and efficient. "This is Patricia Okonkwo, CFO of Cross Technologies. Dr. Cross asked me to reach out to you at this number." Marcus glanced at Sienna, still asleep on the couch. "How did you get this number?" "Dr. Cross has ways of communicating even when she's unavailable," Patricia said carefully. "I need to meet with you both. Today. It's urgent." "How do I know you're not working with Malcolm?" A pause. Then, "Because if I were, you'd already be dead. Malcolm doesn't send CFOs to do his killing. Meet me at the truck stop off Highway 89, exit 47. 2 hours. Come alone, both of you. And, Mr. Reed, watch for tails. Malcolm has people everywhere." The line went dead. Sienna was awake now, sitting up, the blanket pooled around her waist. "Patricia?" "She wants to meet, says it's urgent." "It's a trap," Sienna said immediately. "It has to be." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "Or maybe she's genuinely trying to help. Either way, we need allies. We can't do this alone." They woke Zoe gently, fed her breakfast, and tried to make everything seem normal despite the tension crackling in the air. Marcus explained that they needed to go to a meeting, that Mrs. Chen's sister, a fiction he invented on the spot, would watch her at the safe house. "I want to come," Zoe protested. "I'm good at meetings. I can be really quiet." "I know you can, baby girl," Marcus said, kneeling to her level. "But this is a grown-up business. Boring stuff. You'd hate it." Zoe considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to come back." "Always," Marcus promised, pulling her into a tight hug. "I always come back." They left Zoe with Mrs. Chen's sister, actually a former colleague of Sienna's who owed her a favor and asked no questions, and drove to the meeting location. The truck stop was exactly what Marcus expected. Concrete and diesel fumes, 18-wheelers lined up like sleeping giants, a diner that probably served coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Patricia Okonkwo was waiting in a booth by the window, a woman in her mid-50s with gray-streaked braids pulled back in a professional bun, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the bearing of someone who'd fought her way to the top and earned every scar along the way. She stood when they approached, her eyes scanning Sienna with visible relief. "Thank God. When Malcolm said you were dead, I didn't believe him. The man's a pathological liar, but even I wasn't sure." "Patricia," Sienna said, her voice thick with emotion. "How bad is it?" "Bad." Patricia gestured for them to sit, sliding a folder across the table. "Malcolm's been moving fast. He called an emergency board meeting yesterday. Claimed you had a mental breakdown before the crash, that you've been unstable for months. He's using your absence to position himself as interim CEO. He can't do that without board approval," Sienna protested. "He has board approval. 4 of the 7 members voted in his favor. They think you're either dead or incapacitated. Without you there to defend yourself, Malcolm's spinning whatever narrative he wants." Marcus leaned forward. "What about the embezzlement? The illegal weapons development?" Patricia's eyes sharpened. "You know about Project Nightfall." "We found evidence," Marcus confirmed. "Financial records, contracts with sanctioned nations, enough to put Malcolm away for decades if we can prove it. That's why I'm here." Patricia pulled out a flash drive. "I've been documenting everything for the past 6 months, every suspicious transaction, every shell company, every contract that didn't make sense. I knew Malcolm was dirty, but I didn't know how dirty until last week." She pushed the flash drive toward Sienna. "This is everything I could access without triggering security alerts. Financial records, email communications, transaction logs. But the real evidence, the technical specifications, the weapons themselves, the communications with buyers, that's all on Malcolm's private server." "We know," Sienna said. "We need to get into his estate, access that server." "Impossible," Patricia said flatly. "The security is military grade. Biometric locks, armed guards, cameras everywhere. Even if you got inside, you'd need Malcolm's fingerprint or retinal scan." "What if we had Malcolm?" Marcus asked quietly. Both women turned to stare at him. "What are you suggesting?" Sienna asked. "I'm suggesting we make him come to us," Marcus said. "Set a trap. Use something he wants badly enough that he'll walk right into it." "And what does Malcolm want?" Patricia asked. "Control," Sienna said softly. "He wants me back under his control. That's all he's ever wanted." Marcus met her eyes across the table. "Then that's what we give him. Or at least, that's what we make him think he's getting." They spent the next hour planning, Patricia filling in gaps about Malcolm's movements, his schedule, his security protocols. The picture that emerged was of a man obsessed with maintaining his image, his power, his dominance. "There's a gala tomorrow night," Patricia said. "Annual Cross Technologies fundraiser, black tie event, all the major investors and board members. Malcolm will be there, playing the grieving husband, accepting condolences for his deceased wife." "Perfect," Marcus said. "That's where we make our move." "How?" Sienna demanded. "I can't just walk into a public event. Malcolm will have security everywhere." "You don't walk in," Marcus explained. "You're already inside, hidden in plain sight." He outlined his plan. Patricia would arrange for catering staff credentials, get them inside the gala as servers. While everyone was distracted by the event, they'd access Malcolm's office in the adjacent building, download everything from his server, and get out before anyone noticed. "That's insane," Patricia said, but she was smiling. "It might actually work." "It has to work," Sienna said, "because if it doesn't, we're all dead." As they left the truck stop, Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with terror. They were committed now, past the point of no return. Tomorrow night they'd either expose Malcolm Cross and end his reign of terror, or they'd walk directly into the trap he'd been setting since the moment Sienna's plane went down. On the drive back to the safe house, Sienna was quiet, staring out the window at the passing landscape. Finally, she spoke. "Marcus, if something goes wrong tomorrow, if Malcolm catches us, I need you to promise me something." "Don't talk like that. Promise me," she insisted. "Promise me you'll take Zoe and run. Don't try to save me. Don't try to be a hero. Just get her somewhere safe and forget I ever existed." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I can't promise that." "Why not?" "Because," he said simply, "Zoe already loves you. She drew you a picture this morning before we left. You, me, and her, holding hands under a rainbow. She put it in the fridge. She asked me if you were going to be her new mommy." Sienna's breath caught. "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was too early to know." But Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I didn't say no." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to fully explore. But something had shifted, some line had been crossed. They weren't just allies anymore, weren't just two people united by crisis. They were becoming something else, something that looked dangerously like a family. When they arrived back at the safe house, Zoe ran out to meet them, her drawing clutched in her small hands. "Look, I made you a picture, Miss Sienna. That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's me, and we're all happy." Sienna knelt down, taking the drawing with trembling hands. 3 stick figures, one tall with dark skin, one smaller and brown, one tiny with pigtails, holding hands under a bright rainbow. Stars scattered across a blue sky, hearts floating everywhere. "It's beautiful," Sienna whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Zoe threw her arms around Sienna's neck, hugging her tight, and over the little girl's shoulder, Sienna met Marcus's eyes. In that moment, they both knew. Whatever happened tomorrow night, whatever dangers they faced, they were fighting for more than justice or revenge. They were fighting for the possibility of this drawing, this hug, this chance at belonging. They were fighting for their family. The gala infiltration worked. Marcus accessed Malcolm's server while Sienna confronted her husband publicly, live-streaming his confession as FBI agents arrived. Malcolm was arrested for treason and attempted murder. 6 months later, Marcus accepted the chief engineering officer position at Cross Technologies. Sienna sold the company, started a foundation for domestic violence survivors. On a sunny Saturday, Marcus and Sienna stood before friends and family. Zoe, in her flower girl dress, beamed as they exchanged vows. "You saved me," Sienna whispered. "We saved each other," Marcus corrected. Their family was finally complete. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.